Hello and welcome to another episode of the Breachside Broadcast, home of the finest voxcasting either side of the breach. On today's episode, we continue the story of the madness of Malifaux. With the arrival of the Burning Man, the future of Malifaux will never be the same. And as today's story shows, neither will Malifaux's past. I hope you enjoy part 4 of Madness of Malifaux, right after this word from our sponsor.
This episode of the Breachside Broadcast is brought to you by the Library of All Things. Whether you're looking for the story of Tan Jiong, the great child warrior, or Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, or Raging Lord of Storms, you'll find it in the Library of All Things. Please do not get lost in the stacks. Management takes no responsibility for patrons who are consumed by paper tigers.
The entrance to the Red Library was nestled into an alcove off the main drag. No sign hung outside the worn red doors, and if you didn't know what lay beyond, you might assume it was just another warehouse or tea shop. Smooth iron bolts ran in rows across the top and bottom. Where to start? Where to start? Legends of self-immolation, perhaps. Or there might be something in the histories of the tyrants, Lynn mumbled to herself, fumbling to retrieve a set of ornate keys from her belt. The librarian picked the heaviest key and slid it into the lock. It resisted until, just when Lynn almost couldn't turn anymore, the entire mechanism moved with a reverberating echo. She pushed one of the doors open and slipped inside. No matter how many times she saw it, the sight of the Red Library took Lynn's breath away for just a moment. Huge shelves soared impossibly high into the ceiling, packed full to bursting with reams of paper, bamboo scrolls, and thick tomes bound in hide. Rolling ladders helped librarians reach their texts, but just as many walked on invisible stairs, bending the physics of the library to get where they needed to go. Motes of shimmering light filled the air as well. Colors dripped from the old wooden bookshelves and spiraled lazily through the air, like puddles of oil reflecting light. Lynn never got tired of watching how the library reacted to their inquiries. It was endlessly curious, poking and prodding at treasures even it had forgotten about. Desks and workstations filled the Red Library's main floor. Scholars worked to interpret massive amounts of text, written in dozens of dialects. Scribes painted on new sheets, transcribing whatever words they needed to. Including Lynn, only a dozen or so people walked through the library. Where the trading house of Katanaka had felt dead and dreary, the Red Library was a living, breathing, vibrant construct of knowledge and curiosity. A teeny spirit shaped like a water drop with big, bulbous eyes floated around Lynn as she checked in with her colleagues. She let it rest on her shoulder as she made her rounds. Min and Yufei were collecting a newly discovered portion of the library, detailing trade relations between first-century Korea, as well as a rogue shelf of poetry that claimed to have been written by an Oni during the Edo period. The enormous Hakuho was hauling barrels of scrolls from a nearly forgotten crypt out into the light, so they could be catalogued, copied, and stored properly. And Han, his face ink-spotted and kimono smeared with dust, had recently emerged from the library with a particularly interesting map of the Silk Road. Through it all, the library spirits floated or rested on the shoulders of the librarians, or bobbed on one of the rafters overhead like songbirds. The spirits were every color of the rainbow, their forms liquid and shimmering, with eyes and mouths that would disappear like drops of ink in oil, to coalesce elsewhere on their bodies. It really was an incredible transformation. There had been no such beings when Haru Katanaka was in charge of the Red Library. The walls had been grey and bleak, more like a prison than a place of learning. Silence clung to every surface. Every book was a corpse, dragged from a shelf and pried open before it would give up any of its secrets. Fear grew like fungus on wet parchment, nurtured by Haru's tantrums and threats. That old man had constantly fought with the library of all things, trying to dominate it and tear out whatever information the former Oyabun demanded. Following Mizaki's coup, one of her first acts had been to appoint Lin as head librarian. The move had come as a surprise to everyone, not least of all the young Linh Ly. The junior librarian had little experience, but approached the job with a sense of joy and curiosity that was in stark contrast to Haru's demeanor. Little by little, the library had come alive. Each story Lin read, every book she completed, healed trauma caused by spells used to bind part of the vast collection to the Red Library. Unexpectedly, one of the playful spirits had materialized one day, as Lin was organizing a bookshelf of children's stories. It had followed Lin as she wandered the stacks, lighting her way as she worked while old Haru slept. She called it her booklight. Eventually, Lin had a whole swarm of booklights in tow. Those nights were long and lonesome, but the library helped a kindred soul in need. That had been the beginning of the changes that slowly swept through the entire Red Library. Now the booklights aided all the librarians, and were a constant presence in the main stacks. She had never seen them in the greater library of all things beyond the borders of the Red Library, though sometimes one would accompany her on her expedition. With Haru out of the way, it was like the Red Library was finally free to express itself and sate its own curiosity. Once she was done checking in on her companions, Lin headed to her office to figure out what to do about the tasks Mizaki had set for her. She sidestepped the piles of books illuminated with magic and scrolls, bearing words that shifted to and fro. Her offices were just off the main hall. An archway of covered lanterns marked the entrance. Flame was rare in the library, and these lights had been specially treated to prevent their spread to the surrounding tomes. Still, their flicking light made Lin nervous every time she stepped through the arch. Her office was a comfortable space, lined with bookshelves that were stuffed with books relating to Lin's current research project, and bordered by low, comfortable chairs and long tables, both covered in books and scrolls and ink sets that threatened to spill and ruin their surroundings. It was another marked change from Haru's reign. In those days, this room had felt like a crypt, where interesting stories went to die and rot away. The central table was slightly different. Lin shared this space with her primary assistant, Mia, an older woman whose time in the library stretched back to the days of its separation from the library of all things. Prepared books and notes sat in neat piles, while the source material was laid open on stands, underneath magnifying lenses with ink-smudged notebooks within easy reach. The material currently laid out was on the subject of Kimon, from history to physiology to reports from the front lines of the recent incursion. This was what had consumed Lin's thoughts for the last month. Now she had a new direction. She cleared a space at the desk and set to work. There was so much to do, but every book had a first page. The only way to get to the end was to start. She broke open a new notebook, dipped a fresh pen in ink, and collected her thoughts. She didn't get very far before she was interrupted by a voice in the doorway. Her assistant, Mia Murakami, backed into the room under the burden of a stack of books, taller than the neat bun of pepper-gray hair on her head. I found a new treatise on Minamoto Yoritsune's final stand against the Demon King. This one is told from the perspective of one of his lovers, and details more of his final days. Some passages are too spicy for your young eyes, but I will study those for you. She reached the central desk and dropped the stack with a grunt, sending a cloud of dust and loose papers into the air. For the purposes of research, of course. Of course, Mia-san. Heroic of you, Lin said, barely suppressing a smile. The older woman treated Lin like she was still a blushing child, and not head librarian of the greatest collection of knowledge in the Three Kingdoms. But I'm afraid I must leave that research entirely to you. I have a new assignment. A new assignment? Mia's wizened face peeked around the books. Deep wrinkles shadowed her eyes. It reminded Lin uncomfortably of the haunted expression in Mizaki's face. So your meeting with the Oyabun went well. That was supposed to be a secret. Such a secret that only your handsome boyfriend knows about it, along with anyone who happened to be eating lunch at Han's Little Heaven, or saw you walk up the back staircase at the trading house, where no one has gone for months. Mia brushed dust from her fingers and sat heavily on one of the stools. I like to appear wise and well-informed, but everyone in the little kingdom is gossiping about who visits our shadowy Oyabun. Ah, well. Then yes, my meeting went well, Lin answered. Good, good, Mia said distractedly. She shuffled through the pile of books she had brought, then pulled one down and paged through it. And how is our dear leader doing? Does she seem well? That stopped Lin in her tracks. Gossip about visitors was one thing, but she had heard the rumors about Mizaki's condition, and now she'd seen proof that something was deeply wrong with the boss of the crime syndicate. And Mizaki had specifically told her not to share what she had seen, under threat of death. We're all under a lot of stress, the Oyabun more than most, Lin said. I can't imagine how I'd react in her situation. The library is more than I can handle. Is that so? Well, that's good, Mia said without looking up. And what is this new project? Or were you sworn to secrecy on that as well? Lin stammered something about research, while she tried to remember if Mizaki's threat included divulging information about her new assignment. After a moment, Mia waved her into silence. There are too many secrets in the little kingdom, Maya-chan. The old woman sighed to herself, before turning back to Lin. You and I are in the business of knowledge, of learning. How are we to know if things are kept from us, Almost absent-mindedly, Mia drew a clean scroll from under the desk, and lay it next to the passage she was studying. She placed a knobby hand over the far older document, and began chanting quietly. Lin watched as Mia peeled off magical copies of the kanji. She let them hang in the air, straightening lines and allowing the characters to make themselves more legible. When satisfied, Mia felt for the new scroll, and let the words take their place on the paper. The magic around them faded. What remained looked as though it had been transcribed fresh not 5 minutes before. That still amazes me, no matter how many times I see it, Lin said, momentarily forgetting their conversation. Mia shrugged, then cocked her brow at Lin meaningfully. Lin sighed and relented. I'm supposed to see what the library has on the Burning Man. Not only the Red Library, the entire collection. Lady Mizaki says the library favors me and will protect me. But you've seen what's been happening. Beyond the borders of the Red Library, the stacks have gotten dangerous since the Burning Man returned. She's right. You have a gift for the stacks, a natural talent. Mia paused her work and smiled at the young librarian. That's why she put you in charge. I suppose. But I'm not even sure where to begin. The library of all things is... She gestured expansively. I mean, it contains all things. That's a lot of things. Mia looked at the clock perched on a small pile of books. It's already 6. Why not come back fresh tomorrow? I really can't delay. I was going to write out some notes, but I can't seem to concentrate. I think I'll just get stuck in. Lin slammed the blank notebook shut, capping the pen and ink pot, then slipped all 3 into her satchel. Keep an eye on Hakuko, will you? He's been napping in the stacks when he thinks no one is looking. Mia nervously checked the time again, before clapping her hands together. I have a suggestion, if you're willing to take advice from an old lady, she said. If you're going to leave the confines of the Red Library, it's probably good to have a plan. After all, if you get lost, how will we know where to start looking for you? I suppose. What do you suggest? Begin your search among the histories of magic. We know from the Guild's account that echoes of the Burning Man have been moving backwards in time, from his inception to San Francisco and perhaps beyond. If that's the case, maybe there are echoes that go further back. It would make sense that those echoes would follow lines of magic, Like a magnet drawn to iron. Maybe. I was planning on focusing on Malifaux. The histories of the tyrants, the legends of the Neverborn, that sort of thing. No, there's no use looking there. At least not at first. He's only just arrived in Malifaux. Earth is where you want to begin your search, Mia insisted. Lynn creased her forehead, thinking through the old woman's logic. Eventually she shrugged. If you think that's wise, and you're right, it's best if someone knew where I was in case... She left the implication unspoken. But I really must get started. Don't stay too late, and lock up when you're done. Lynn snatched her satchel off the desk and looped it over her shoulder, then grabbed a pack of stale dumplings that she'd forgotten to eat the day before off a side table and headed for the door. Of course, my dear. Stay safe, Mia called as the door shut. Inside a box, half a tyrant started up a conversation with another prisoner. How unfair, it said. Wasn't right that the bigger guy kept them down. A one-on-one fight had decent odds, sure, but nobody ever came out ahead. Maybe a 2 versus 1 would be enough to net them the jackpot. With a handshake, both prisoner and fortune smiled. Time to rig the game. As soon as Lynn was gone, Mia hurried to the door of the office and peeked out to make sure the young librarian was truly out of her hair. Lynn paused by Min and Yufei to chat for a moment, then ducked her head and disappeared down one of the long rows that led deeper into the library. At least the child had taken Mia's advice. She didn't like having the girl in the stacks while she was about her business, but there was nothing Mia could do about that now. She returned to the table and retrieved the folio she'd prepared ahead of time. A stack of fresh parchment, 2 ink sets, and her best quill pen. One of the troublesome booklights bobbed overhead, burbling curiously to itself. Hara would never have put up with such frivolity in his library. Well, no matter. The Oyaban had made her decision, and now Mia had made hers. With a final look at the clock, Mia pulled a lantern down from the archway, then started towards the stacks. Min called out to her, Mia-san, Lynn said I should show you these Keeman drawings. They bear a striking resemblance to... Tomorrow, dear child. Lynn has me on a new project, and it's very urgent, Mia said, her smile strained. Min's puckish face fell, and she nearly dropped the sheaf of loose-leaf paper. Just put them on my desk, and I'll look at them in the morning. With that sorted, Mia hurried down one of the aisles that led into the deeper stacks. A different aisle, it should be noted, than Lynn had taken. The vertebrae in Jack Door's broken neck creaked when his bagged head snapped to the sky. Runes fled bright green on dead skin. His hand reached up, quivering slightly. Jack had time for one thought before the burning man tore through reality. He'd never shaken like that before. The stack stretched in the distance, gently curving away like a snake slithering through stones. The deeper you got into the library of all things, the more organic the architecture and layout felt, as though the shelves and arches had grown in place, rather than been built by mortal hands. Which was possible. No one really knew the origins of the library. Lynn paused at a branching of the aisles, marked by a crooked bookcase that branched overhead like a bonsai tree, its shelves arranged in haphazard clusters. It was a familiar landmark. She was close to the limits of the Red Library, the portion of the Library of all things claimed by the Ten Thunders, and protected from intruders by layers of warding spells and obfuscation. Lynn and the other librarians rarely ventured beyond the Red Library. It was dangerous beyond those familiar borders. To the left is mythology and fiction, and to the right, history and magic. That means we're going this way. Lynn followed the right branch until it terminated in an enormous door of inlaid teak and ancient bone. The sigil of House Katanaka was burned into the wood, and surrounded by runes of warding and protection. A simple brass lock was worked into the sigil. Lynn passed a hand over the keyhole. The metal was cold to the touch. She suppressed a shiver. then retrieved her keyring and sorted through it. Protective enchantments flared once when Lynn turned the key, temporarily deactivated. She steadied herself and pushed the door open. The smell of dust and mildew filled the air. Light from the red library pushed back the shadows, and a distant glow limned shelves that reached 20, 30, even 40 feet into the air. There was no sign of a ceiling. If Lynn squinted, she might be able to convince herself that stars twinkled overhead. That was different. Her memories of the Library of All Things were more claustrophobic, like a tunnel lined with books that burrowed through the earth. This must be just a different part of the library, Lynn whispered to herself. Insect sounds echoed overhead. The ground, lined with ornate Persian rugs stacked one on top of another, was damp underfoot. Very different. She didn't get very far into the library before Lynn realized she would need a light source. Returning to the familiar stacks of the red library, she retrieved an unlit lantern from a cubby and hurried back to the still open door. She was looking down, fumbling with the wick and a match, when the warm glow from her lantern was joined by a greenish hue emanating from overhead. A booklight spirit bobbed down the hall in her direction, its bulbous head cocked curiously. When it reached the open door, it fluttered around the archway, making a bubbling sound. "I guess I'll let you lead." "You know what we're looking for more than I do," Lynn said quietly, raising the lantern to light her way. It would take centuries to work through every volume, but the library had a way of guiding those who searched it, bringing the necessary volumes to hand. All she had to do was trust her instincts, trust the library, and start looking. Lynn ran her hand along the spines of the closest books, pulling out volumes and flipping through their pages one by one. The booklight hovered at her side, looking over her shoulder and chittering. The books felt random, not even conforming to Lynn's understanding of this area of the library. What was a cookbook doing with the history texts? And this one, a compendium of salamanders, complete with hand-drawn illustrations and a fold-out taxonomy starting at newts and ending at some troubling variations on the amphibian that looked like it could have run with the gibbering hordes currently plaguing Earth. Lynn was about to put the taxonomy in her satchel when the booklight chittered curiously. "Right, not what I'm looking for, is it?" She returned the book to the shelf. "They're related, I suppose. After all, the hordes first appeared in conjunction with the Burning Man, but no, not the same thing." She continued deeper into the stacks. "What do you think? Where should I be looking?" The booklight burbled to itself for a while, then scooted down the aisle and disappeared around the corner. Lynn sat up abruptly. "Hey, don't leave me alone in here." She snatched her lantern off the ground and hurried after, satchel banging against her hip. The booklight waited just beyond the corner. "Did you find something?" Pulling the book that the booklight was bobbing next to, Lynn sat on the ground and thumbed through it. This was a history of pre-breach magic, a guide to the old ways of doing things, before the breach empowered the rituals that carried on to today. It was an ancient text, and between the fading ink and awkward language, Lynn had trouble making much sense of it. "I don't think this is it, little guy," she said. "If anything, the Burning Man is more closely associated with this side of the breach than the Earth." Disappointed, Lynn stood and started to reshelve the musty tome. The smell of burning paper stopped her. Terrified she'd kicked her lantern over, Lynn danced to the side and looked around for the source of the smoke. But her lantern was still safe, glowing brightly at her feet, and there was no sign of flame anywhere else. She whirled around again. There was definitely smoke in the air, hanging in thick rings around Lynn's shoulders, almost as if she were waving around a torch, or as if the book in her hands was on fire. Cinders crawled between the closed pages of the book. Lynn yelped and dropped it, jumping back as the spine thudded into the ground and the book fell open. A torrent of flame erupted from the gutter, turning the ancient tome's stitching into writhing worms of flame. Afraid that the whole book was about to go up, Lynn looked around for something to douse the flames. In the Red Library they kept buckets of sand nearby, but there was no sign of anything like that. Horrified, Lynn pulled her shawl free and started batting at the burning book. To her surprise, the book kept burning, but didn't seem to be consumed. She stopped her efforts to extinguish the flame and picked the book back up. The covers were hot, and the spine crackling between her fingers, but the fire seemed to be confined to the text. The margins were untouched. It was the words that were burning. The words on the page in front of her caught fire. Flare, bright flame, eradicated the words, singeing the parchment. But as the flames progressed, they burned new words into the page. The ink was darker, fresher, and the letters formed were more modern than those they replaced. The burning man was rewriting history right before her eyes. She flipped pages and watched as the revisionary inferno spread through the book like a burning inkblot, annihilating what had been there and replacing it with a new version of itself. This was still a treatise on ancient magic, but now it reflected the new reality of the burning man. Lynn looked up and down the aisle. Another book flared to life, sheets of flame breaching the tight stitching of its spine, before simmering down to a steady burn. Across the way, a folio of scrolls erupted in spouting flame, going off like fireworks as their edges crisped, the fragile wax seals melted and ran like water. Slowly, Lynn walked down the aisle, tracing the burning man's progress through history. One by one, throughout the library of all things, books caught fire in the dark. Their words burned and changed, never to be the same again.
That's it for another episode of the Breachside Broadcast. Join us next time for more Tales of Malifaux.